Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this KPBS webinar. We've got some great conversations coming our way and some clips that are very exclusive, so I hear, with Fred Kaufman from Nature and our environment reporter, Erik Anderson. We're going to just have some fun here for a few minutes while everybody's coming into our Zoom webinar room right now. We're going to have a poll just to get things going and test your knowledge of nature. So our first poll question is in season 40, in the season 40 premiere, My Garden of 1,000 Bees. How many species of bees did wildlife cameraman Martin Dorn find in his tiny urban garden in Bristol, England? Was it 10 different species of bees, 30 different species of bees, or 60 plus different species of bees? And I'm fascinated by this because I've had bees literally nest or take, I don't know, occupy the walls of my house. I will never forget that. Cutting into the wallboards and finding a whole hive of bees. So who has seen that premiere? All right, let's see, 60 plus different species of bees is our audience's selection. Fred, do you want to weigh in here on the answer? Was it 10, 30, or 60? Is our audience in the know?
The correct answer is more than 60 species of bees.
Crazy.
How big is the garden? How big is the garden, Fred?
I mean, it's not terribly big. I couldn't. His garden is in Bristol, England, and so he's in a city.
Wow.
So it has a footprint of maybe a 3-4 bedroom house.
Amazing. 60 plus. All right. Our next question, everybody, our nature lovers here. Does Nature's award-winning website feature, and the address is pbs.org/nature, full episodes of Nature, behind the scenes content, educational resources, news articles, or all of the above? This one's sort of a giveaway, but let's see what our audience knows about the Nature site. And so darn smart. All those PBS audiences. You are correct. News articles, educational resources, behind the scenes content, and obviously full episodes of Nature. All right, question 3. This one stumped me. What is the name of the tree, that iconic tree featured in the Nature opening sequence and logo? Is it a dragon's blood tree, an acacia tree, or is it a cork oak tree? Testing your knowledge of trees and this iconic image.
I feel like we should have like Jeopardy theme music.
Yeah, Erik, go ahead. Go for it. I'm going to test your skills. Yeah. All right. Dragon's blood tree, acacia tree, or cork oak tree? Let's see. An acacia tree, a cork oak tree. All right. Fred?
It is an acacia tree, which is also called a flat top tree because it does have a flat top, and it's found in Africa.
Amazing. And all of you guys got that right. That stumped me. But it is truly an iconic tree. And we're remodeling our building, and I'm like, I want that nature tree somewhere in the building. All right, our last question. This was another great one. Nature episodes have been narrated by Sir David Attenborough, Uma Thurman, George Page, or F. Murray Abraham. Who is narrating these episodes? Or who has narrated them? A lot of great voices there. All right. Has everybody had time? It's actually, we kind of tricked you there. It's actually all of the above. Right, Fred?
It It is. And what surprises me is nobody voted for F. Murray Abraham, who
He's done the
was
most shows.
He's done.
elusive narrator for about 2 years.
Yeah,
Maybe about 12, 13 years ago.
absolutely. So they've all voiced at least one. Uma Thurman did what, the Pumas?
She did Pumas and just recently Born in the Rockies.
Oh,
And
okay.
Sir David, of course, has been on many, many shows, and
Mhm.
he's 95 and he's still working, and he
Amazing.
terrific. And who else was on that list? Well, George
George
Page,
Page,
people remember,
the original.
created the series and was the original narrator, and many others and more, etc.
Yeah, so none of you were wrong because it's all of the above. We just didn't have that option. Sorry about that.
What we want you to be aware of is the question and answer button, and it's located on the bottom of your Zoom panel. If you look for that, that's the place where you can ask a question of Fred. And what we'll do is I'll keep my eye riveted to that screen through the course of the evening. When a question is in there, tell us who you are and what your question is. I'll get that question to Fred as soon as we can. We're not going to wait till the end of the night. We'll get, as soon as there's a question in there, we want to make sure that we get to that right away. The obvious thing here, I think the place to start is to let you know who our guest is today. It's Fred Kaufman. He's the guy that's done one or two, what is it, 2 episodes, Fred, that you've done before? Two. Your screen is still muted, so if you can unmute yourself, that'd be great. Fred Kaufman is the executive producer of Nature. He's actually been with the program for its entire 40-year history. So he knows just as much about the current season of Nature that's going to be airing on PBS stations like KPBS as he does about the very first season of Nature when it aired, 40 years ago. And for those of you who are numbers geeks and you're keeping track of the numbers, the series has won something in the neighborhood of 700 honors from the television industry, from wildlife groups, from parent groups, environmental organizations. They've won 3 Peabody Awards, which are the biggest awards you can get in broadcast, 20 Emmy Awards, and they were the first ever program honored by the Sierra Club. They've offered us just this wonderful, unique view of the world around us, places that many times we don't have the ability to get to. Fred, thanks very much for giving us some of your time. We greatly appreciate it. Let me just start by reminding people, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A section. We'll get to it quickly. But Fred, tell me about when you first started Nature. What was it that kind of was the genesis that got this project moving forward?
Well, we're going back to the early 1980s, and PBS was quite different from what it is now. But what happened was back in those days, there was a lot of very good, very interesting content being produced by the BBC. No surprise there. And this is well before cable. And a lot of that excellent content had nowhere to go outside of England or Europe. And so George Page, who created the series, had actually purchased a number of these wildlife shows from the BBC. And I think he had about 6 of them. And he had a very good idea that instead of taking just these 6 shows and broadcasting them, let's see if we could find another 8 to 10 shows, combine them with the BBC shows, and we'll call it Nature. And so instead of it being these 6 shows that go on the air and off the air and we're done with them, we'll actually plant the seed of this ongoing wildlife series and see how the audience reacts and what people think. And so that's what he did. It wasn't a lot of money. There was really minimal risk involved. And from the very beginning, the series was quite popular. And it started that way. I was hired for 3 months to do some work, knew very little about, well, knew nothing about nature and even very little about television. But I was hired for 3 months, and then I was renewed for another 3 months. And really, from the very beginning, it was off and running, and I didn't have a break in employment for the next 40 years.
That's a good thing too, right? When did you know? When did you know that this was working? This was what you'd hoped.
Well, I have to say, when that first show went out, and I remember this, it was October 12th, 1982. There was a big half-page review of it in the Sunday New York Times, and the guy just raved about it. Primarily, it was very different than anything we had seen. It was slower, it was more thoughtful. There was very interesting music. It wasn't kind of the wildlife stuff we had been seeing, which basically boiled down to Marlin Perkins and some National Geographic specials, and wasn't a lot of it at all. And so here was these full-length documentaries from very exotic places, looking at the time, exotic animals. And I've said back then, and I say now, there's always been an appetite for this kind of programming. It's never gone away. It's never wavered. We've always done well. We're always one of the highest rated shows on PBS. People just love connecting with animals in one way or another.
That's awesome. I don't want to go too long without giving people a chance to kind of catch some of the flavor of what you're talking about. We've got a clip here that we want to share with you. It's called Animals with Cameras. And is there anything we need to know about this before we play the clip?
Well, I just wanted to set up for everybody what I'm showing this evening are clips from upcoming shows, some of which are, a couple of years out. And it's very exclusive material. PBS hasn't even seen some of these things. The paint is still fresh and wet. So be advised, they're upcoming shows. Animals with Cameras is a very interesting idea where we're always looking for ways to present nature differently, sort of timely. And this was a case of, and I could talk about it on the other side of the clip, actually putting cameras on the animals without inhibiting them and seeing the world as they see it. And in this case, it's a loggerhead turtle from Cape Verde, which is off the east coast of Africa, off of Senegal.
Okay, let's see the clip.
Nice.
Well, absolutely stunning video footage there. When I first saw this, I looked at it about a week ago. When I first saw this, the thought was, my goodness, you couldn't do this 5 years ago. You couldn't do this 10 years ago. That's new, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were attempts made 10 years ago. National Geographic had this thing called Criticam, and they would have a camera and it would kind of float and be tethered to the animal that way. But this is a little bit more sophisticated. It's a small camera attached to the turtle, and the glue and the device that holds it there deteriorates after a couple of hours in salt water. So the camera just floats to the top, doesn't stay on the turtle for any length of time, and it doesn't inhibit the turtle. But to me, what I like about these shows, there are certain subtleties, and the fact you saw that fishing net, and clearly that's goes on all over the ocean, and the turtle trying to feed through it, and yet dangerously perhaps swallowing a piece of the net that could harm her. You would never see that with a camera person tracking a turtle. I mean, that's impossible. And yet how important it is to see that and know that there is that danger. and that these nets would smother the plant source, the food source for those animals. So it's the subtleties of what these cameras pick up that I think are very informative.
I want to remind folks that you can watch the nature special, Animals with Cameras. It's going to be broadcast January 19th and the 26th at 8 p.m. On KPBS as part of the Nature's 40th anniversary season. So something to look forward to there. You got an exclusive peek at it here. We've got a question from our audience. Charlotte Albergettis is asking, how do you safely attach and remove a camera like that on an animal?
First of all the animals that we film, what we were trying to do was supervised by these researchers and scientists. Those were the people you saw in that video. The animals are captured, and then these devices are put on them. Again, it doesn't inhibit them from doing anything. If they brush against something, the cameras will come off immediately, and they're fixed to them in ways that after a couple of hours, the cameras will fall off, or in the case of the water, float to the top. But none of the animals are harmed. It's completely safe. They're not stressed. It's no different than a scientist grabbing or capturing an animal and tagging it the way they do so often to or radio collar it to track their movement. So that's done. What's great is the animals don't even have these cameras on for more than a day. It's really a few hours or overnight, and then the cameras are released.
I thought it was interesting watching the faces of the researchers. You could see the excitement in their faces as they're experiencing what we're experiencing.
Yeah, sometimes when you contact these people, they're so excited to participate because as a camera crew, we're coming with something that costs a lot of money, to create these little cameras and have the people there and put it on the turtle. And we're actually advancing their knowledge and their research by providing all these kind of resources and experiments that they themselves might not have been able to do with their funding. So usually there's excitement that, hey, great, we're going to be able to do this, we're going to be able to see that, because there's only so far they can go. And can you imagine you're studying these loggerhead turtles over a number of years, but once it goes in the ocean, you kind of, you wait for it to come back on land. But now there's an opportunity to see what they're doing, how they're feeding, do they socialize, all these questions that you've had in your head, some of which can be answered. So you can see how exciting it is for them.
And the quality of the video, it's just so sharp and bright and really kind of takes you there.
Well, that's the tricky part, because there are two episodes. One is on the ocean where we have loggerhead turtles, sea lions, and sharks, and the other episode was in Australia. Initially, there were two shows. Initially, there were going to be 4 shows, but because of COVID, we had to cancel the other 2 shows. We couldn't travel. But in Australia, we were filming these bats at night, and it's tricky. I mean, the turtle in the open ocean, and you have the sun, and the lighting is good, and you're right, the video turned out nice, and you can really see it. At night, it's a little tricky. Everything is monochromatic. It's kind of dark and it's black and white. But nevertheless, you can see these moments. So yes, that technology has come far that allows us to put on these remote cameras, and it's not a big old $1,500 camera or expensive lens. It's very minimal, but yet the images are pretty impressive.
Julia Shabawin wants to know from our question and answer session. By the way, if you have a question, feel free to write that question in there. We'll get it to Fred as soon as possible. She wants to know, what was the hardest animal to physically get a camera on? That doesn't sound terribly easy to me, but I'm not the professional you are.
Oh, boy, oh boy. To be honest, they picked the animals where they thought they wouldn't have too much of difficulty in getting. I guess it was somewhat challenging to put it on a shark. They had to get the shark close to the boat to actually get it on. That was challenging. They did it with the koalas, but they would get the koalas from the trees and bring them down. Hard to say. That nothing stood out as being. I mean, it was all challenging, but different challenges. I wouldn't know how to answer which was the hardest. Sorry about that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. We're not going to spend the whole hour, obviously, talking about the turtle clip. One of the wonderful things about the program Nature, and you get a little slice of it here, is that we're going to have a chance to go to a couple of other locations. One of them, a much colder location. Fred, is there anything you want to say before we take a look at this clip? It's I thought this jumped out to me as one of the really funnier little clips that you sent.
I love this clip. It's my go-to clip whenever we have a board meeting in New York and they want a clip. I love it. It's fun. It's Adelie penguins coming back. It's extraordinary. Adelie penguins mate for life and come back to the same nest every year, which to me is inconceivable, because there are nearly 1 million of them. And then you'll see in this clip how closely they nest together. So I find that hard to believe. They do an 8,000-mile migration around the coast of Antarctica for feeding. And this clip is they're coming back from migration, they're building a nest.
Absolutely love that clip, Fred. That's really, really wonderful. Sometimes we have a tendency to give animals attributes that we have as people, but that was quite surprising when I first saw it.
The interesting thing about that clip and that behavior is the cameraman who shot it didn't know that went on and filmed it completely by accident. He was there filming the migration, the return of these penguins to their nest sites, and basically just getting these beautiful big wide shots, some of which you saw there. And then this little drama was playing out in front of them, and he just turned his camera toward it and recorded it. But I could see it being one of those things where if we said, hey, the rock stealing behavior, make sure you get that. And he'd be, well, I can't guarantee that. I mean, I don't know. And it would have been this whole big thing of, well, how much time do you need to get? And meanwhile, it all happened in front of him by accident. And it's a charming little funny scene,
Yeah, truly wonderful. I'm curious about the music. Was that written for that scene, or did you just find a piece that happened to work perfectly?
That particular film has a composed score, so everything is written for that scene.
Pretty stunning there. We do have another question, and I want to remind you that if you're joining us and you're along for the ride here, listening to Fred Kaufman, the executive producer of Nature for the last 4 decades, and you have a question, this is your opportunity to get that question answered. All you have to do is go to the Q&A section. It's located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can click on it, type in your question, and we will get to it as soon as we possibly can. Charlotte Alberguetis had a question. She says, how do you ensure that our filming doesn't interrupt the natural behaviors or activities in those settings? And obviously you talked about whether or not it surprised the team, but how do you keep from becoming part of the scene when you're filming something like this?
Yeah, well, Charlotte, that's a good question. And that's part of the ethics of filming nature. It's almost like the doctor's code where they say first do no harm. That's similar to what we do. We're really there to observe. And that's tricky because when you come out with a camera, it can be stressful to an animal, and where you put your tripod, and you don't want to stress them. You don't want to get them nervous. You want them to go about their business in a very normal and natural way. I can tell you that everybody we work with has that in such high regard, to really keep a safe distance for obvious safety reasons, but also to document natural behavior. And they're all good enough and experienced enough to know when an animal is behaving differently because it sees you and it's startled, or doesn't know what you're doing there. And everybody could recognize behavior that's not normal and natural. So behavior like that, we would look to edit out of a film, but everybody very consciously tries not to. I mean, we have hides. You might have heard of this. I mean, people go out with these little small camouflage tents, and they'll put themselves in these tents. So the animals don't see a human figure. They just see this kind of green canvas box that doesn't move, doesn't threaten them, and therefore, we're able to film things pretty easily. Or you work in locations where the animals are habituated. Africa, for example, you could drive around and the animals there are so habituated, they're so used to seeing safari vehicles that nothing bothers them, nothing stresses them, they behave normally. However, if you get out of that vehicle, as innocent as that might sound, they completely freak out. They're not used to seeing people outside of a vehicle. So they see this big square tin machine, and it doesn't hunt anything, and it's rather predictable and slow. But the minute, and I've seen this happen, the minute you get out of a vehicle, you frighten them. I did that once in Africa, and I nearly got trampled unknowingly. I nearly got trampled by an elephant. And so the key is you always stay in these vehicles.
Ellen Hafter wants to know if there's a recording available of that music from the penguin clip.
No, nothing official. The music from that entire show they brought in an orchestra. It's very big. It's very theatrical. So, Erik, you're good at knowing when the dates of the broadcast. Do you have the penguin date in front of you?
We don't have that one in front of me, but we'll figure out when it is, and then we can
February. You're not going to be able to buy the score, but let me encourage you to DVR
watch the show. And you can
watch the show, DVR it, because I listen. The music is really quite big and grand and noteworthy. You'll enjoy it.
We have another question from Christian Roa Mendez Almanza. What animal is your favorite to observe with some of this new technology? And how has that technology changed how you see animals today as opposed to how you might have seen them 10, 20 years ago?
Well,
favorite animal first.
My favorite animal to observe is the elephant. Not even a close second. I've been fortunate enough to be on safari a couple of times, and when you're in the company of a herd of elephants, at least what I found, my heart started racing. I don't know why. I've never had that reaction to anything before, but there's something about elephants that they're aware of you in a way that no other animal is aware of you. So you could have a lion walk past your vehicle and you don't think anything about it, but you could have an elephant 10 feet away looking at you, and there's a consciousness there. It's almost like a human looking at you. You could tell when somebody's looking at you if you're sitting in a bus or something, and if they are, they might be thinking about you. Same thing with an elephant. So I find them really extraordinary, and their intelligence and awareness, their consciousness, really, I have almost an emotional, sort of reaction to being with them. How has filming changed? And Erik, rephrase that for me, please.
The technology, how does, has the technology allowed you to see an animal differently today than maybe you would have seen it with the available technology 10 or 20 years ago?
Well, what's gotten really good are these night vision cameras where you can now go out at night and film with under starlight and moonlight where you couldn't do that before. But it's not so much the technology. As much as things have changed in the last 40 years, some things haven't changed at all. And doing good research and finding a good location and putting in the time to understand these animals, that's what's going to pay off for you. I mean, it's kind of really doing your homework and being dedicated and having an understanding of their behavior, so you know where to situate yourself, what times of the day to be out there. Just good old-fashioned hard work is going to get you really good behavior and be able to access that animal better than anybody else. So that to me is still what is needed.
So you've taken us under the ocean so far tonight. You've taken us down to the South Pole. Let's go to a different location that's the polar opposite of the South Pole and go up to the Arctic. And is there something you want to say about this clip before we watch?
Well, this is a clip. First of all, I don't think we even have a signed contract for this yet. So
Okay.
This really
Definitely insider stuff.
This is really insider stuff. And everybody has to promise that they won't share it with even a loved one. Just keep it. It's our little secret. I wanted to share it because it's the Arctic Wildlife National Refuge. It's been in the news. There's always talk about development. It's a beautiful, extraordinary location, Northeast Alaska. I think this is a grizzly clip shot mostly with drones. The cameraman who shot this film spent 5 years there. I mean, not, over a period of 5 years filming. So it's a special film on a very pristine, beautiful American location.
And let's have a look.
A brief summer winds down.
That's the
Yeah, just a quick reminder, if you're watching this after the fact, you're not going to see the entirety of that clip because it has some proprietary footage on there. But Fred, you were going to say, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. It's these clips are so fresh and new, and we don't have everything squared away yet, so we can't really share them on social media. But the caribou herd is called the porcupine herd. And I remember in my early days on Nature, I mean, this is a 200,000 individual herd of caribou. I mean, it's enormous, called the porcupine herd. And from my earliest days on Nature, we had films in Alaska that would feature the porcupine herd. And I always thought that was a joke. I go, I don't get it. Why are they calling a herd of caribou porcupine? So they're named for the Porcupine River that they cross in Alaska. And that grizzly was just so beautiful. And I'm always careful when I show some of these predation scenes that I have the prey actually get away. Enough energy and excitement to keep you suspenseful, but I know people get sensitive about the ultimate fate of some of these prey animals. So in this one, they got away.
This is probably because I'm an old time radio guy, but I noticed that it's not only that we see what's going on, but we're also listening to and we're hearing that. How important is that when you try to create that sense of space?
A sense of space in the show,
Yeah,
in the scene,
yeah,
you mean?
yes.
God, yeah, we spend a lot of time building these effects tracks and trying to make them rich enough so you don't need music. And so particularly in a location like that, the expanse of it, um, and you want to hear a little bit of wind, and you might want to hear, a bird chirp, but in the far distance, and you want to hear the water, but you have to be conscious that you're up in a drone, so you can't hear the water as if you're standing right next to the stream. It has to be, you have to have a little bit of distance to it. So it's really an art form for some of these sound designers to actually create that atmosphere of a legitimate sound of what one would hear standing in that location, when in fact probably little, if any, was actually recorded in that location. It's all done after the fact. You're not bringing a sound person with you to Alaska for 3 weeks, so a lot of that stuff is done afterwards in a studio.
Is it, do you, when you put together a show, do you sit down in a boardroom and say, this is exactly the show we want to do, and then you go out and get that show? How does that process work for you guys?
Well, it works in a couple of different ways. One is, yes, there are times when we go, we want to do a show on XYZ. We think, and then we would look, all the camera people, all the producers have specialties. So the guy or the woman you want to shoot lions in Africa is not the same person you want to film sharks in the Pacific. So when we have an idea of a topic we want to do, we will go ahead and find the people we think are appropriate to making that film. And very often these films cost many hundreds of thousands of dollars, which we can't afford to do by ourselves. So we will always bring in another producer from another territory. We work a lot with the Austrians, or we'll work with the Australians, or we'll work with the British, and we'll carve up, the globe that way. We'll take rights for America, they'll take rights for Europe, etc. So sometimes there are ideas we have that we want to pursue. Now, of course, we can't be everywhere. So somebody from South Africa who we know and have worked with will get in touch with us and say, I have this very special story I've been watching, and I think you'd be interested. Can I send you some footage? And in fact, Erik, my next clip is a sales clip, and we can get to that later. But
Sure.
yes, the ideas are either homegrown or they come to us from other people all over the world.
Well, let's watch the next clip. Do we need to know anything before it starts?
Well, again, this one we're not able to share. It's not ready yet. It won't even be on the air until the earliest next fall. But this is a film about bird migration and the effects climate change is having on them as they make these huge migrations. And this isn't a clip as much as it's a sizzle reel. And so this reel was sent to me by a producer in Australia who already had support from Australian television. And the idea was, so this is what I do for a living. Somebody sends me this kind of reel and they gauge whether or not I'm interested in it. And I was, and I am, and I think you'll see why. So you could run that.
So if you're with us now, you're going to be able to see the whole clip. But if you're watching this later, this clip will be edited out of the show. So enjoy. Was that our acacia tree that we
No,
talked about at the beginning of the show? No,
no,
totally different tree.
Totally different.
So for folks who are going to watch this later, you're not going to be able to see that entire clip. That's because it's not going to be aired for quite some time, and the folks who are with us live get a unique view into the future thanks to Fred Kaufman, the executive producer of Nature for these last 4 decades. Fred, we had a question from Christian who wanted to know, I think this was about the last clip too, but he was curious whether you catch yourself rooting more often for the predator or the prey when you see these natural dramas.
Me,
Yes.
personally, the predator, always.
Why?
Because if you look at, okay, so there you saw a grizzly picking off a caribou, one of 200,000. And how many grizzlies are there? So to me, when you have a very healthy predator, wolves, bears, lions, that means you have a very healthy prey base, which means you have a very healthy ecosystem. So when predators win, to me, it means there's a healthy ecosystem there, and that has obviously value. Also, when you're seeing a predator succeed in a show, bear in mind it probably missed the previous 8 times. So they don't succeed as much as they miss their prey. But I tend to root for the predator because without them everything collapses, and they're feeding on a prey base that could afford to lose 1 or 2. That's my heartless analysis.
Fair enough. Julia Shabawin wants to know whether or not in your 40 years of documenting nature, whether you've noticed changes in the plants and animals' lives because of the changing climate.
Oh yeah, well the most obvious are these polar bears that, they're swimming more often as they maneuver around the Arctic for food because the ice is melting. And there are times when, we're losing polar bears because they're simply exhausted. They're not able to get onto an ice floe the way they have in the past. This whole thing about flyways, which you just saw, these migrating birds, because climate change is shifting when the seasons come and when they're, when the food and the plants have sprouted to provide food for them, if that sort of synchronicity is off, the birds show up and the food's not there. Maybe the birds are too early, maybe they're too late, and they're suffering because of that. It's called phenology, the timing of these events in nature that trigger other events. And if these animals are migrating and they're off by a week or so, there's no food for them, it becomes a problem.
We had another question from Charlotte Alberguetis. She wanted to know whether there were drawbacks. We obviously see the advantages of using drones, but are there drawbacks to using drones when you're trying to tell a story about nature?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there could be. I mean, yeah, everything we do and all the technology has to be used judiciously. You want to use it for the right reasons. You don't want to overuse them or underuse them. So I think it does depend. Years ago, before there were drones, we would rent helicopters and it would be $400 an hour. And, when that was a day you had circled on your calendar, I was like, hey, today we got the helicopters. Let's hope we have good weather. Let's hope that the sun's out. Let's hope we're going to find what we want. And we had equipment to stabilize the cameras on the helicopter so they wouldn't vibrate. And you would have a day, maybe a day and a half of shooting aerials. Well, now with drones, I mean, you obviously can send them up anytime to get those aerials. They're less intrusive than the helicopters. We've all seen these beautiful aerial vistas of horses galloping, and other animals galloping, running. Well, the reason they're galloping or running is because of the helicopter. They're not doing that naturally or normally, but the sound of the helicopter has triggered them to run. And even though visually it really does look beautiful to see these galloping horses, the fact is they're probably stressed and scared. So drones don't do that. Drones are quiet and they really don't interfere with the animals.
So major advance there. Fred, we really want to thank you very much for spending this past hour with us. It's been really wonderful, not only in this past hour, but in these past 4 decades. You've really opened up a lot of eyes to the world around us. And for that, we are grateful. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Hopefully we can have you back here soon. We can let some of our Producers Club members and other audience members get a slice of your life and your perspective and learn a little bit more about the planet around us. But thanks again for coming. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, Erik, a pleasure, and it was great chatting with you, and hopefully next time in person.
In person, there you go.
I'll
That's
come
what we're all
out.
looking forward to.
Always want to come out, and I hope that day comes.
We'll look forward to it. Thank you so much, Fred. We want to thank Fred for joining us. He's been the executive producer of Nature for the past 4 decades. The new season of Nature starts on PBS. It's on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. beginning in January with part 1 of Animals with Cameras. It will also be available to stream on the PBS video app. So if you are comfortable online and you can get to the video app, you can watch Nature there. In fact, the past 16 seasons of Nature are available on that video app if you are a Passport member, if you're Passport enabled, if you will, which means that you're a member with an actual a Passport passcode. Public media stations like KPBS don't exist without the support of members like you. So thank you very much for your support and your continuing support for wonderful programming like Nature. We have more Directors Club and Producers Club events coming up in 2022. And like Fred, I hope that many of them will actually be live and in person. But we thank the capability, the technical capability to be able to do this at all, even though it is a virtual event. Please look for more information about those future events in your email box. It's been great connecting with all of you. I hope you join us for many more member events in the future. Thank you very much for your time.